Okay, I've got my CZ457 set up with the Discovery 5-25 Gen 2. I've got my KYL rack, which my spotter's facing here at 50 yards, and I'm just going to go ahead and try to clear the rack, hopefully without too many misses. That last one there was a bit of a glance, but it was an impact. Alright, here is the Discovery Optics Gen 2 5-25. This is their ED glass model. On the outside, it tells you a few things about it, that it's shock-proof, waterproof, ultra-slim tunnel vision, big eye box, nitrogen purged, fully multi-coated lenses, and then it says that it has a warranty. I'll talk about that warranty in just a bit. Let's open the box and see what you get inside. So when I open the box, I see an information card. This has some of the stats and specifics for internal travel, windage, how big of a diameter you have for the ocular lens, all the relevant information. If you just don't know much about that, you're trying to buy rings or other accessories, this is a useful stats card as far as the item specifics goes. Then you're going to have your quality control checklist and inspections. So on the inside of this, there's your inspection list to know that somebody has hand inspected and it did pass on all of these. Here's another checklist just to make sure that everything is installed and in the package properly. And then you have your instructions themselves for the optic. It does come with a cloth, a nice lens cloth, large size. Then inside the box, a couple extras on this one. It's pretty cool. Comes with a type of scope leveling kit for sliding underneath the center portion by your erector tube. You slide that underneath on a Picatinny rail, and that will help you level this out. I don't need to on this particular rifle build. You do get a nice scope brush. These are pretty useful. It's multi-sided, so you can take that apart, and you have different kinds of little squeegees here that are soft and delicate and good for protecting glass in general. There is included, and I like this a lot, there is an ocular cap if you want to change this out. I'll show you that in just a moment. You have your tools. This does, as usual, as with most of the Discovery scopes, most of them, this comes with rings. So you're geared up, ready to go from the onstart. You open the package, you can get this mounted up to a rifle as long as it's Picatinny. Now the optic. The optic is packaged in a way that the sunshade is over your ocular housing, so you're just going to take that off and set it down. I don't need the sunshade for this particular review, but it does come with a sunshade. Okay, and here's the optic, and it does come installed with this kind of scope cap cover. This is a removable piece like that. It's just kind of a clip-in style, and I'm going to go ahead and right away install the proper ocular lens here. I prefer that, or the ocular lens cover rather. I prefer that quite a bit more. There is a throw lever. Let's go ahead and install that as well. There we go, that's all it takes. Now I'll get the rings mounted up, get this on the rifle and ready to go. Starting off, you have your fast focus eyepiece, and one thing I wanted to let you know is that when I get an optic sent to me, the first thing I do is take it out of the package and I twist and move everything. The turrets, all of the dials, knobs. I turn everything, the Magnification Ring, several times, over and over. That reason is couple things. Number one, each optic generally needs to be broken in. So from the factory, when they've been in a setting for months, or some optics years, and they've been setting in a storehouse and they haven't been being used, and they're set up with a diopter all the way in, it will be a little stiff right off the bat. And I don't want reviews to make it look like the diopter is really stiff or gunky or anything. So I break them in, I give them a few turns, and then do the unboxing. And this one has plenty of grip, and it does have a decent range of travel. It should help you get the reticle tight for your eye. All right, the way that you set that, by the way, is you look at a blank wall, blue sky, something featureless, but just for moments at a time, and you're just moving this a little bit back and forth as you're taking a peek, because you don't want your eye muscles to do the work of making the reticle sharp each time. You want this to be calibrated and set up right away for your eye. Every time you look at it, that it's going to be sharp for your eye, and you just can't do that if you stare into it. Your eye muscles start to contract, or the muscles do what they're supposed to do and make the reticle sharp. The problem with that is next time you look through it, it's going to appear maybe a little fuzzy for a moment. It might take your muscles in your eye and the memory a little too long, and so get it sharp for your eye by looking at something like a featureless background. You could set the parallax to infinity so that the background doesn't confuse your eye at all, and it's just a blur, and then you're just setting the focus for the diopter, for the reticle itself, nothing else, just that. Now taking a look at the Magnification Ring. This one does come with this extended kind of like cattail mag ring assist here that is removable. So if that's going to run into your bolt knob in any situation, you could just take it off. And as you can see, it's able to be moved with just my fingers. This one has a really aggressive texture here. It kind of feels like a hammer face a little bit. Like an aggressive hammer face. But I would say this moves freely enough with just my fingers, even in the cold. And the tolerance do not seem to be sloppy. It's just got a faint, if I can show you, it's got a faint amount of wiggle there in between the ring, but it appears to be doing what it's supposed to. And when I magnify and I move it, even when I'm using the assist here, as I was looking at the image, I didn't appear to have reticle shift as I was going back and forth. Just slightly on the firm side, but not tight, not immovable. Just a little bit on the firm side, not even overly firm. Just not loose either. 5 to 25, so you're looking at a direct throw all the way across, side to side. Pretty large dial, but it does do the trick of giving you that extra assistance. Looking at the Illumination Knob, again, it has that same texture. It's a really, really oversized knob, just like the other ones on here. It has 6 settings with off in between. I would say 1 is night vision, and 6 is dusk, would be my estimation for the way that's set up. Really, really big cap, which is going to house your battery. Runs on a standard 2032 watch style battery. Get that matched up here. There we go. And let's see, now parallax. The parallax wheel or knob, dial, whatever you want to call it, goes from 25 yards. The next increment is 50, then 100, then 200, then 500, and it jumps from 500 to infinity with not much of a throw in there. I think most people who are shooting this are going to be shooting it closer to these distances right in here anyways, so that doesn't bother me at all. It's slightly firm. Let's say it has a similar firmness to the mag ring feel. So not so tight that I can't move it. I'm not really muscling this. It's just not, very light in the amount of pressure to move that around. It's not tight the way that I've felt some parallax wheels or knobs. Some are so tight that you really got to bear onto them and grab it with your whole hand. And this one I can get between my fingers just fine, but it's slightly tighter than I would like it to be. I did find that the numbers were ballpark accurate. I think when I was shooting at exactly 50 yards, I was like right about here. When I was shooting at exactly 25 yards, I was like, is it keyring parallax perfectly? I'm not sure at 100 or at 25 yards. Parallax matters more the closer you are anyways. And then at 100 yards, I think it was generally about here, and then 200 yards, it started being more and more off. And then at 1,000 yards, I was closer to just infinity line. But the wheel is large, it's oversized, so make sure you have a bubble level that complements that, and you can see behind your rifle when you are squared up. When it comes to setting the zero stop, I like to grab the turret. Since these are not lift to operate, I grab it firmly so it does not move as I loosen up that housing. This one is on pretty firm. It's a really huge, oversized turret, and it has a really, really big zero set. And this guy right here, which is your cap to keep the whole turret on. So let's get this giant thing off there. And underneath this is your zero stop mechanism. So I'm going to loosen up the Allens on here and then twist it around now that I am successfully zeroed where I want it to be. Now that they're loosened up, I'm going to move this until it interferes with the disc down here. That's your mechanical zero stop. And I will tighten up those Allens just finger tight, not doing anything crazy. I don't want to over tighten these into the housing because that would be a big mistake. Can strip these out, it is possible to do. Now I'm going to line up zero, and you have this witness line here with your come up marks, which is kind of a old school technology. It's a little interesting. And I'm going to make sure that gets squared up exactly. Let's see. Get this on the housing to line up the right way. A little bit of trouble there. That looks good. And then I'm going to take the O-ring seal, put it back in there. That should help resist water and dust, and get my stainless cap back on. I'm going to hold onto it tightly so it doesn't move and I don't lose my zero. Even though I'm technically twisting against the zero stop here, it should not move on me. And then I'm going to test for function. Very solid zero stop. Definitely not going to move on me. Lines up right on zero on the witness mark. As you can see, the turrets themselves have, instead of like a revolution indicator on top, these have numbers, and they're lined up on the full mil marks. So you have on your tenths here, you have your full mil, and then you have half mil that are elevated so that it's a little more clear when you're counting. With turrets this huge, those numbers are really, really big. They're easy to see, even with this guy up in the way. I'm not having issues with that at all. I can see these, no problems. Even in the dark, I should be able to see those pretty good. And it also has directional arrows. Same process for windage, except for it doesn't have a zero stop, so you don't have to worry about a zero stop with this one. I just grab onto it so it doesn't move. I don't lose my windage. And then I will slip it to zero and go test my zero by shooting a 5-round group one more time. The objective is obviously a 56mm. It's very, very large, and yes, it does clear here, but with the flip cap covers, just the way that I've run this with low rings, I'm not using the rings that were provided. With the low rings, it was actually making a little contact with the barrel, so I decided just to take those off for this and enjoy it the way it is. So being that this starts with an offering of 36 mils of internal E, and then at least about 14 in the reticle, the way that I configure it. 10 mils, 20 mils, and I should have like 28.5. 28.6, yeah, probably 28.6, and that's on a 50 MOA rail, which is quite excessive. I think that pushes the glass a little bit beyond its normal centering, and you're going to start seeing a little bit of distortion until I get to about 300 yards, so 325, somewhere in here. At 325, now the glass is looking, optimum. It's the best that the glass has to offer. The best image is more centered right about there at around 325. But if I didn't want to sacrifice my 50-yard clarity, then I would reduce the 50 MOA rail down to something like a 20 or a 15 MOA rail, and that would help me keep this optically centered a little bit better and get a superior image, especially if that's what I was going to be shooting most often for a distance. Go ahead and put it under my leg so I can get some support off this guy today. I've got my CZ 457, and it clamps in really well on this chassis version here. There we go. Discovery sent out this 5-25. This is their new Gen 2 5-25. And so I get to test this out and play with it and see what the low light performance is like. Now, if you're wondering why I'm shooting in a somewhat crouched position, my goal is to support my body a little bit. So I have my foot under my leg and I have my knees locked into kind of bone position here, and so that I have less play. That's pretty good. I think that's decent right there. A bigger bag would be even better, but I can do that. Excellent. Okay. Just that easy, and I'm comfortable. I'm really steady, actually. Temperature is dropping and changing really rapidly, and I can feel it. I can feel the cold air falling into the little valley I'm in here, and that's going to change my data a little bit, so I'll play around with that. All right, so I'm all set up. I'm going to dial in, let's see, start off with 13 mils. 13.2. I think that should be ballpark for the big steel or the clays, and I have my remote device to click record on the camera on my spotter, which is really convenient. So press that, and I can actually hear it. Click that as well. That's really cool. Let's go ahead and send a couple rounds down range, and I will turn this mic off. Here we go. Let's go for the clay on the far right first. Oh, very low. That temperature is going to do it, man. Wow. I'm telling you, the cold really changes your data. Okay. About a half mil high. It's close. Oh. Dancing around. Oh, I do have one more. Here we go. Got it. I love it when it's on the last shot. So as far as clarity goes with the Discovery, I'm having just a little bit of reflection off the sun coming here on my lens. A little distracting. I am shooting on 25 power, so that's the darkest this is possibly going to be, and it does darken up some. Let me throw on my microphone. Okay, so the image does darken up some at 25 power. I do notice that. I'll loosen this up, turn it around a little bit. Really, really like this Vanguard rest and just being able to get it really calculated. Right where I want it to be, pretty steady considering it's a tripod and I don't have it weighted down with a big heavy rifle. Now going back to the optic, you know, I think 15 is not a bad place as far as brightness of image, but I was still spotting my misses there. I had several of them. I was still spotting my misses off the tripod here. And I would say in the vegetation, in the brown grass or the brown rocks and stuff, I can still see detail. There's no sunlight in there. I can still see detail. It's just a little bit lacking for contrast. I would say Earlier today in the sunlight, I was getting some chromatic aberration and some distortion. But, you know, when I go down to more functional ranges, 12, 13 power, the iBox, first of all, the iBox is way better. So I want to make sure I'm clear about that the iBox is a little touchier than I would like at 25 power, but usually at 25 power, I'm really locked down to a position, usually shooting from the prone, not off a tripod, or I'm just spotting. I rarely shoot off 25 power, so I'm going to be a little more generous. And I'm going to say that at 17 power, it's still pretty practical. The iBox isn't, it's not too bad. The bezel is, it's okay. It's definitely okay. As far as the shadowing going on right now, I would say it's a little more than I want to see, but at that 12, 13 power, now I can see the full reticle. I can see the 10 mils, the 11th mil, which isn't numbered. Then I can see the pinnacle, which is like a translucent chevron, basically. And then down to that, to where the thick black bar starts. And so I can do a lot with that. Technically, I can shoot this out to 500 plus yards. 530 would be fine with what I have here for information. And in fact, if I had more time, I would go back right now and do a little bit of that. But sundown's in 3 minutes, I think. The colors are, yeah, just maybe a little bit on the flat side in some areas. But again, guys, looking at the price point of this optic, you know, I like the reticle. I do think it's a functional reticle, and I can do a lot with that information. Center dot is pretty small when I'm at 12, 13 power. It's a little easier for me to ascertain at about 20 power. Right about there. Yeah, about 20 power, it's a little more doable. Lots of breathing room around the reticle and lots of ways to use that reticle for specific holds and get data. When I was a little high and I was a little left and a little right, a little low, you know, breaking up into 2/10 was pretty much all I needed. And then windage marks, which I did have to hold for some windage, being able to hold a little above, a little below. It's just a unique reticle, and I do think it's pretty functional as long as the glass can meet it there, which at 12, 13 power is much more acceptable in my opinion. But I can still spot at 25. I just did it and made that hit on my 9th shot. Okay, number 10. Let's see if I can hit that steel. You should be able to hear it if I turn my mic off. I hope you can hear that. Definitely doable. All right, I know it's very windy out. It's 10 to 12 mile an hour winds, but I'm going to try to shoot during the lulls. I'm shooting at 325 yards with some Normatch 40 grain, and it's about 32, 33 degrees out right now. That does have an effect on ammunition. I think I'm going to be in the ballpark here. Let's go for that clay pigeon first. That one right there. Okay, a little to the right. Elevation looked pretty good. A little low. A little high. All right, I apologize about the semi-awkward angle, not having another tripod set up. But here we go. I'm gonna get this going at 530 yards, and I have 10 rounds left. I better make the most of these 10 rounds. And one more thing, just because I can, attach my bag to this. A little more weight on the tripod. There's no recoil from the 22 really, but just steadiness in general. Normally I put a bag or something under my knee, under my leg, to get that bone support, like elbow to knee, but I think for this time I'm just gonna add the weight directly to this. All right, one more time. So I dialed 28 mils, 28 mils, and I need to hold another 5 in that territory. It's not 100% clear with the temperature what it's going to end up being. We'll just have to see if I can spot it with this 5 to 25, and I believe I will be able to. There it is. Okay. So I was closer to 6.5 and 1.5 mils of hold. Okay. So I'm going for the clay. I'll put the center crosshairs. Okay, right there. That's the clay that I'm going for, but I have to hold 6+ mils on top of the 28 mils. And some wind. I'm going to go a little more. I think that's a little high. Okay, elevation, I mean, I'm going to have some standard deviation problems there. I've got one bullet left. I'm going to have some standard deviation problems there, but I do think that overall, let's get that to focus. I think overall, I can see my misses. I can see, if I did get an impact, I would see it. I have one bullet left. I'm going to wait for the wind to die off here a little bit. And let's go ahead and send it. Okay, that was a miss. A little too windy to shoot this far right now, and especially on a clay pigeon. I think a couple of those shots would have been on my full-size IDPA, obviously. I may come back and try a little bit more of this when the wind tames out, if the wind tames out tonight. The sun is out, it's really nice, and I do have some 6.5 Creedmoor I need to be shooting right now for another project. One more time. This time I'll start from the small side and work to the right. Obviously the reticle was able to make quick work of that, swung right through those at 50 yards with no trouble. I am shooting from a bench, so it's not terribly difficult. But I would say the reticle is a good enough size that I can put it on top of the very small target there on the far left. And it has sufficient room to favor left or right, but it's not so small that it's hard to pick up against that contrast of the gray and green and brown background. Okay, I'm taking a look here. I'm looking at my target at 325. And there's some minor chromatic aberration, a little distortion around the extreme edges of the glass when I'm up on 25. The eye box is definitely slightly touchy, and so I do see shadowing around, and unless I'm right behind it with a right length of pull, I do have some trouble. But I mostly just would use that mag range for spotting and maybe, I don't know, target identification. I wouldn't typically shoot it that high, although it does make the reticle a little bigger for me. Contrast is a little easier. I like it at about 15 power. I think the image is pretty good. I can see all 11 mils of the reticle, and if I back it off just a touch more, I think the image brightens up a little bit. Now that I've used it quite a bit, I've got quite a few rounds down the barrel of this rifle with this optic on there, and I would say optimum range for viewing is going to be that 12 to 15 power. In there, it really makes the most of the reticle as well, and I like it. I think it's a decent image, especially at the price point. This isn't too bad. When I go beyond that, up to the higher mag, I just don't think you're going to be running around doing obstacles and PRS at high power like that anyways. It's mostly for spotting. So not a huge dig on the optic, not a huge negative. It's just what it is. And it's actually true of many, many optics. I don't see too much tunneling. There's a little there. Yep, just a little tunneling. And when I dial it to max range, which I'll do again in a little bit here, there's just a little bit more tunneling, which is very normal. Or there's more shadow, I should say. There's more shadow induced. It's like a reduced image because of the extreme ends of range, basically. I'm just pushing everything to extreme. So at 500, you'll see that a little more, or I will. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and throw a few here at 325, and then I'll take out my long shot target camera system and shoot some non-match ammo at paper, just for fun, because I'm curious how it'll group. And then I'll talk a little more about the optic and tell you what I think this is good for and if I recommend it. You shouldn't have any trouble hearing these impacts, assuming that I get impacts. You shouldn't have trouble hearing that. That was a miss. Impact, okay. Some nice double taps in there. I wonder, I got 3 rounds. I wonder if I can get a triple tap. I'll try, but I probably can't get that. Let's see, I need to change my data a little bit. I am pretty low. All right, here we go. Let's see if I can get a triple tap in there. Nope. Screwed up the first round. Double taps. I'll have to work on the triple taps though. Just for integrity's sake, I will tell you that in order to shoot some smallish paper here at 300, I did opt to move it up to closer to 20 power. And I think it helps me with distinction for that dot, even though the dot is a floating dot and the reticle is a decent reticle. I just prefer shooting paper a little bit on the higher power when I'm not getting really bad mirage. And today I'm not getting really bad mirage, and I'm not seeing at the center of the glass really bad distortion or chromatic aberration that would make the image unpleasing. The edges, you know, are a little more distorted, a little more, yeah, they're a little more hazy, but center of the glass is not bad. It's definitely not bad. I think it's actually pretty decent for the price point, and comparatively to optics that were made 3 years ago by Discovery, I think this is a huge improvement. All right, not amazing. I did 2 groups there. I tried to dial off my target so that I can reuse the target over and over. I just have 2 up there, and then I kind of shoot around it. And I started up a little too high in those orange ones. The first 4 shots, it looks like, were in one MOA group, and I had one drop down there. And then the blue group there, my second shot group, that's 5 shots, and that's close to 1 MOA, but it's got 2 that are just slightly out. So I'd say, you know, like 1 1/4 MOA, right around there. So not terrible, actually, for non-match ammo. Pretty happy with it, and I was definitely able to see pretty well with contrast against those red targets and the reticle. One thing that's important to do is just to let you know that these turrets are more tactile, in my opinion, than the Gen 1. I'm sure they're not that different because the Gen 1s functioned well, and there wouldn't be a big reason to change the Gen 1s as far as the practical range of travel goes. But I'm telling you that I actually feel like these are more audible. They just, yeah, the other ones seemed a little bit more thuddy to me. It was kind of like a thud, thud, thud when I would click, and this feels more clicky, more tactile. Definitely not backlash issues. It feels pretty solid. The clicks are relatively close together. Let me just let you hear what that sounds like. So they sound pretty decent, and they definitely feel they feel more tactile to me. That's my opinion. But they could be the exact same, and it's just a character model issue. But the elevation and the windage both feel the same on this model, but they both feel like an improvement over the Gen 1. That's just my opinion. So I really enjoy ELR 22 shooting, and this does have enough internal elevation to get me out to 530 yards on this 50 MOA rail. It is going to tighten the image a little bit. It's going to be just slightly fishbowl and not look perfect. And that's okay, because this is a budget optic, and I'm not comparing this against, even a $700 or $800 optic. It's much cheaper than that, but the image is sufficient. The travel range is consistent enough, and I do think that I'll be able to get a couple hits on target. I do have a target hit indicator light on there. As long as it doesn't fly off this time, which keeps happening, I think I'll be able to land a couple hits on target. The wind does seem to be calming down a little bit. And last time I was shooting, it was just egregious. The wind was way too much to be shooting into. I ended up holding, on a good moment, less than 2 mils. And then when it was bad, I was holding 4 or 5 mils. It was just way too windy for a 22. And then also, it's 34 mils right now in this temperature of elevation. And so I end up using a little holdover, and it just gets complex when it's windy. That's what I'm saying. So I'm going to take a few shots here at 530 on that steel, and hopefully with my spotter you'll be able to see them just fine. Nonmatch, 40 grain at 530.
There's an impact. There's another impact. There's another impact. There's another impact.
Oh, I had it there for a second. I shouldn't have taken a break. Well, I think this optic has proven to be kind of a decent competitor in its price point. I know that I'm not going to compare this against an $800 or $1,000 optic for glass quality and for the full range image. Dialing this out to the extent that I did for 530 yards, I think that's really far for a 22. And if it can do it even with a little bit of fishbowl and not a terribly distorted image, I'm going to give it a pass for sure. So the ED PRS Gen 2 5 to 25 by 56 first focal plane, I think it's actually a pretty decent optic in its price point. It is competitive with other things out there at this price point, and especially around this time of the year. The sale prices I'm seeing on Amazon, it's pretty respectable, and you can do a lot with an optic like this. I know a couple distributors like Epic Arms has a website. If you're up in Canada, I believe he would be the person that could connect you really well with this. Here in the States, Amazon tends to be the best prices I see. And if you're on a budget, I actually think this optic can get you pretty far, and you could even use it for PRS, target shooting, a little bit of hunting, or just plinking like I did here. So thanks to Discovery for sending out this Gen 2 there. I do think it's an improvement on the Gen 1, and I really enjoy using it.